Hey guys, I not so used to this recorded video thing. Usually do the live streams. Well, I did a recorded video of this topic and then it was without sound and then I started another one and couldn't find the files that I needed. So it's been fun. It's been funny. But I'm really excited about this topic. So I'm really excited. What we're going to be talking about today is Eastern perspective, and that's what this next unit is. And what we're going to do is kind of clear our minds a little bit of Western perspective, which we've been working on a lot, right? With linear perspective, always trying to make things like look realistic in a certain sense. Now, when we talk about realism, usually in the West, and when we talk about observational drawing, usually, we are usually talking about what things look like through a photographic lens. And you might not realize that even. We might not be drawing from photographs. In fact, I hope we're not just drawing what we're looking at. We're using perspective systems that were developed in the Renaissance, in Europe, and we think, well, yeah, this is realism. But you have noticed, right, that when people really are impressed by somebody else's realism, people say, "Oh my gosh, that looks so amazing. It looks just like a photograph." Well, as an artist and an art faculty, that drives me crazy because let me tell you what, photographs are art in and of themselves, and I love photography. But I don't want my drawings or my paintings to look just like photographs most of the time, because then I would just take a photograph, right? So photo cameras, which are everywhere and we use them all the time, they really influence how we see things. They flatten things out in a different way than our eyes do. So when we flatten something out by drawing, we might see the shadows differently than a photograph would, for example. But the most annoying thing I think that a camera does about the way that we see the world is it really interrupts. It fools us. It fools us into thinking that the way we see the world is in these moments, these split-second moments of time where our head's not moving around and our body's not moving around. But that's not really how we interact with the world. And you might think, okay, Heidi, you're going on a crazy tangent here. This is how painters made the world look well before cameras were invented, or photography took off in the late 1800s. And you'd be right, except that they've done a lot of research, and the prevailing theory is that camera obscuras, which are basically camera lenses that do not use film, so they've been around a lot longer than film photography. They used camera obscuras to direct light through and project onto canvases, and then they actually traced. So a lot of artists like Van Eyck did that, and that still would just give you like a rough outline, and you would still need to have incredible skill to create the amazing work that they made. But that explains how a lot of the perspective was actually achieved. So we are deeply, since the Renaissance, entrenched in this lens-based culture in the West. And but that's, again, not how we see things. And when you look, we're going to be looking at mainly Japanese artwork today with a few other examples. But when you look at Japanese art, when you look at Chinese art, when you look at Islamic art, when you look at Indian art, you often see, and I'm talking about the traditional arts in those cultures and also some contemporary art, you see a different way of observing the world that is just as, or possibly more realistic than the way we observe the world. So let's revisit Western perspective a little bit, which in a Western sense of realism really helps us make things look like they have more depth, like they're more realistic. So I want you to notice, because I'm on a camera right now, obviously. So if you look at the ceiling above my head, you will see that you'll see the 1 point perspective. You look where the ceiling meets the white wall and where the ceiling meets the paneled wall, or yeah, there's some weird metal stuff there, but you can basically get the sense that the lines are coming together. They're vanishing towards a point. You can see the wall behind me is squared. So we're in 1 point perspective, and you have that the wedge shapes of the walls and the wedge shape of the ceiling creating the room that I'm in. And that makes sense. That's how you see it. And if you were sitting very still in front of me, you would see the same thing that my camera sees. But if you were actually in the room with me, and we're hanging out in my studio, aka my basement, and you're like, okay, and I'd say, could you look, I want you to, there's something weird on my ceiling. Can you look at my ceiling? You would look up at my ceiling. You would go like this. Be like, oh yeah, my ceiling. You'd be like, oh yeah. Oh, look at my ceiling. Be like, whoa, that light's too bright. Okay. But, if you wanted to look around the room, you would literally turn your head and look around the room. You've got my my hoarding that started at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. You've got, you've got like a kid play area. You've got my daughter's kindergarten desk. Oh, look, I moved the camera up so you could see it a little bit better from a different viewpoint, right? I'm moving it all around so you can see it from different viewpoints, because that's how you would actually view the room. You would not view it in this way where the ceiling stays static like that and the lines vanish at 1 point. That's just, it's arguable that that's not reality. So, I think it's going to be kind of refreshing and fun to try to look at things in a different way for this unit, and still use our powers of observation and still draw what we're seeing, but put things together in a different way. So I wanted to show you a couple things. I'm going to show you some examples of the types of artwork that I'm talking about, and some of the different approaches that are used in traditional Eastern arts. And again, this is not meant to be an art history lecture. This is not meant to be anything but a sampling and an overview. I am not an expert, but I do really enjoy looking at these works. So yeah, here we go. Gotta find the present button. There we go. Okay, so here we have, I'm gonna move this up a little bit. Okay, cool. Eastern approaches to perspective. We're gonna look at and notice that Eastern perspective uses a lot of the spaces appear flatter, and maybe more importantly, sometimes with multiple viewpoints. They appear flatter because they're not making use of the types of linear perspective that we're using, but I'm being very presumptive there, but that have been traditionally used in the West. But these largely Japanese paintings are not, they're not worried about that. They're showing space in other ways. So this one's actually a good example of a combination of different ways of looking at space and combining multiple views. At first it seems like, okay, that could be a river with some trees around it and a rock next to it. Not too crazy, but the thing that makes it unique to me in the multiple views is that the main thing is the river, and that actually it gets smaller as it flows further away from us. So in that sense, it's following some of those ideas that that are used in Western art as well, that things further away from you look smaller, and those of course are also used in some Eastern art. They're not unique to the West. But what is more unique to this as a Japanese scroll painting is that these swirls, which are very much, I think they're very good observations of what water sometimes looks like when you're looking straight down on it. Well, the swirls don't get smaller and tinier as it goes back. It's more like you're looking out at the river and also down at the river at the same time. And then let's look at this one where another thing happens. I think you'll see this more in videos on Chinese painting that I've provided for you in the unit. I can also put them in the comments here on the YouTube video. But when you're looking at this, there's different ways to enter the scene. That's a huge part of Eastern perspective, is that the idea is that you're walking around in it a little bit more. And so this one, when you come in, you can kind of feel yourself like kind of walking onto this ledge to the left. And then there's this tree branch that continues and unifies all of the different screens in this piece. And one thing that I think is really nice about it is how if you read it from right to left, which I guess would be a more Japanese thing to do anyway, you're coming in and you have this larger tree trunk that slowly branches out and also does appear to go back out in space, but it has kind of like almost like an optical illusion, because it looks like one tree and also several, like one tree that's close to you, but also these other trees that are further away from you. I'm kind of fascinated by it. Here's some very simple flowers. I just wanted to point out Japanese art is still using a lot of conventions that you might be familiar with. Here the flowers are overlapping, and that is the thing that is creating space. But you might notice that the flowers in the back are not necessarily smaller than the flowers in the front. It is the overlapping and the stacking that's giving it a sense of space at all. And finally, for the flatter ones, they have this flat river that starts on the upper right and flows down towards the middle left, or can go the other direction if you want. The river looks like you're looking down on it like on an aerial map, and the pattern on that river really helps out that linear, those lines, those waves. But then it looks like you're looking across at the trees. So it's got, whoa, I didn't mean to zoom in and out like that, but that's pretty cool. I also feel, and this is probably unintentional, but when I look at it, these feel like these tree poofs kind of look like individual leaves at the same time. So we're going to go on, and for some reason we're going to go through all of those again, and that is okay. So aerial perspective is also known as atmospheric perspective. This has been used in Japanese and Chinese painting for so long. You probably learn about it in an art history class, like a Western art history class. You'll learn about it as something that Leonardo da Vinci discovered. He discovered it way after they did. So I don't know if he had seen some of the art, or if he came to it on his own, because it is based in science. The idea with aerial perspective is that there are layers of atmosphere between things. So the further away that you get, the more layers of atmosphere between you and that thing exist. And so in these ink wash paintings, that is manifested in these really, 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 really watery layers of ink, right? And you see those little mountaintop in the back. And even though it's fairly abstract, you see much more clarity in the front. There's higher contrast. There's some little marks that I think are twigs. So you're seeing little details up front, and then there's layers and layers of mist. And in the back, you see this light gray shape that appears to be a mountain range. Then here's another one doing the same thing. There's two, but this long scroll, and we'll be working with scrolls, so pay attention to how people use scrolls. But it's all mist up high, and these clouds add to the depth. Lower down, you have all the detail. So it's employing two, well, probably more than two, but it's employing a couple methods of creating space and of showing point of view. One is stacking, which we'll get more into later, and the other one is the atmospheric perspective. Actually, look at the bottom. There's like the edge of the body of water. You have those people in a boat at the body of the water, and then you can kind of see the shoreline. And one example of atmospheric perspective is the way, if you follow the shoreline back, how it kind of just fades out. I feel like this one almost needs no words. It's so gorgeous to me. There's something amazing of how they captured so simply the temple poking through the mist. So there's mist before it and mist after it. Therefore, setting it right in the middle ground. There's foreground and background without being very much at all. I mean, there's not much of an image, but it creates a huge amount of space. It's gorgeous. So there's also something called parallel perspective that I wanted to talk about. It's seen here. It says it's seen in Chinese and Japanese art. It's also seen in Islamic art. It's seen and it's used in more contemporary examples. It's used in lots of video games, especially like older video games. Not thinking of examples off the top of my head, I'm sure you will, but when you're looking at older video games before the graphics got so complicated as they are now, in order to have people kind of running through space, they used this type of parallel projection. So parallel lines are drawn diagonally parallel. So they give the illusion of going back into space due to the diagonals, but the diagonals don't meet the way they do in linear perspective. Objects don't get smaller as they go back into space. This gives kind of a viewpoint of looking down on a scene, but the reason it's used in video games is it can go on and on and on and on and on. So if you were in this scene, you could imagine going even further back, and it could continue and continue and continue. It never disappears. But pay close attention to the fact that things don't get smaller in the background, that the figures maintain, and by figures I mean the people, they maintain like particularly about the same size, like little, if you're looking on a small screen, you're seeing like these little black cloaked figures. The rooftops stay all about the same size. It just goes further and further back, and it's set up, there's a network of maybe like city walls that divide up the scene. But you could imagine it being city walls or roads or anything else that would give you that sense. Here's another one that doesn't actually have as many diagonals, but it is really doing this. Well, it does. It doesn't have like a grid of diagonals like streets or walls or anything. But you can see that the way the roofs of the houses are drawn in there, they're drawn on a diagonal sense. They're drawn in that type of parallel projection perspective, and they don't get smaller as you go back. And you can see that there's all kinds of different things going on, all kinds of different areas of the map, different cities, different landscape, and you can kind of move endlessly throughout this piece as well. So a very simple thing that's used traditionally in Japanese and Chinese perspective is just stacking the foreground and the background. Now, we do that, again, I don't mean to use the word we, but when we are partaking in the tradition of Western perspective, we do that too. Things that are higher on the page are further back in many cases. But actually, I'm going to take that back. When you're using linear perspective, something, in the foreground, look at the picture of me again. I'm just gonna go back to this. Look at me, right? Like my head hits the top of this video window. So I'm not in the background. I'm in the foreground. That wall is in the background, but I am covering the whole thing. I am taller than the wall in the view of the camera. So what I was saying before is totally wrong. Sometimes in linear perspective, things are higher on the page. The further back they go, but not always. So it depends on where your horizon line is. So, all right, back to the regularly scheduled program. In stacking, always things higher on the page implies that it's further back. So like you can look up in the upper right hand corner and there is a village. A couple buildings, maybe like a little tower, maybe some walls surrounded by a whole bunch of woods. Upper left hand corner, there's some woods in the snow. Then you look down below, which is maybe where you would start looking actually. You've got the bridge, you've got people on the bridge, you've got this nice body of water. Maybe we're in a park and you've got people having picnics on either side. Very cool. But what's also interesting is, there's sky above the body of water. There's already sky there, and then suddenly on top of the sky there are some other buildings. So that's clearly meant to be further away by stacking it in the image, and that is something that I think is fairly easy to understand when we're looking at it, but it's definitely a different way of creating perspective. Yeah. All right, so I just have a couple of examples of contemporary artists using Eastern perspective. We're gonna look at Shazia Sikander, who I want to show you this big shot. You're not going to be able to really see it very well because it's this like long scroll, but we are going to be dealing with scrolls. The cool thing about scrolls, and the cool thing about this particular scroll is, you can have kind of like the same character moving throughout the scroll, because you can like literally read it either right to left or left to right, and walk along it. You don't have to see the whole thing at one time. And so I'm going to show you a chunk of it next. Whoa. Well, I said I was going to show you a chunk of it next. Here we go. So here is a chunk of that scroll, and this also has multiple scenes in it. You see this figure with long hair, and they're wearing like a white gown, and you can see them in multiple rooms. So one of my favorite things about this is that she's using like this device to help you move from room to room. They're not separated. You've got this on the left, there's a floor that's a grid that just goes like up and down, like right angles, like just square grid. There's this guy on the floor in one room rolling up a carpet, and then you go up and they're in a different room, which seems like it's kind of like a dining room or a kitchen or something. But my favorite part is arguably this part. So you look over like 3/4 of the way over on the right, and if you can see my cursor, cool, but I don't know if you can. So there's the figure with long hair and the white gown is reading something or looking at something, maybe reading a book, maybe looking at like a picture or something, and she's sitting at the foot of their bed, and then go down, your eyes can go down from there and you see a carpet that's on her floor, and then another version of her of them that's kind of faded out. But if you follow the carpet and the floor down, suddenly that's the wall in the room underneath, and then you have the figure down there again. So the wall in this room seamlessly becomes the floor in the room up here. And there's so many cool tricks like that, and it really helps you flow through and see things kind of like you're walking through this building and this person's life as it is. So I just think that's really awesome. And then I was going to show you this British artist who's been living in California for a long time. That last example was his too, but this is the one I want to talk about right now, which is, anyway, the artist is David Hockney. He's made his home in California. He's British. He has spent a lot of time researching Chinese perspective, specifically Chinese. He talks about a lot, and this idea of walking through a landscape and really observing things from multiple views is really fascinating to him. I love hearing him talk about it, but I just want you to look at this work. It's actually a collage made up of tons of photographs, and the photographs are all taken within the scene that he then makes a picture of. But what makes this different from just like one picture of this scene is that he takes all the photographs from different angles. Like he's moving his head around, so he's making a still picture with the camera but including multiple views. So when he talks about this picture, he talks about like almost standing like entirely over and looking down almost at his feet when he's taking pictures of the trash. And he talks about climbing a ladder to take a picture of the stop sign in the back so that it's like exactly straight on, which is not how you would see it if you were standing like in front of this picture and looking at this scene. But then he puts it back together so that it is very similar to like Western perspective. So he's just messing with those things, and I think it's a lot of fun. And he does a lot of those things with different paintings of his as well. He really likes messing with space and playing with it. So you might want to investigate him at some point as well. So next we're going to look at some student examples of the assignment. So the assignment, I'm not going to give you all the details here, but the assignment is basically to like make a scroll, and you're going to take a walk. You're going to take a walk like out in, it could be out in nature, it could be, hold on, I'm having a little difficulty accessing this, so I have to run, hold on, sorry, I need to run through this real quick like. All right, so we're good. So you're going to be taking a walk and making sketches from that walk, and then you're going to create your own scroll using those sketches as reference materials. You're going to redraw things. You're not going to like actually take the sketches and put them on your scroll. You're going to redraw things, but you are going to put them together in a way that's going to take the viewer through your walk. So basically you're going to rely on some of these ideas we've been talking about with Eastern perspective, but make your own image based on your own observations. So a few of these are from campus, and because we started this in class and walked around campus, and then people went home and made their compilations. This one is using the path through campus as a clear way of taking you through the drawing. You can see different viewpoints in here. You can see that you're looking down at the path, down and over at the fences around the path, and kind of across at this tree with the peeling bark. And maybe there's some high amount of detail in the background on the leaves up in the upper right hand corner that you normally wouldn't see when it's that far away. So making use of a lot of the different elements of Eastern perspective in this drawing. And the other thing that they're doing that's also important to your work is that they are unifying it, which I think I already said, but I'm going to emphasize that they are unifying the drawing by having that path run through it, so you know where you can enter and how to go through and experience the scroll. And so here's another scroll which actually is showing some of the same scenes. You can see the same fence posts, and this time you can see the bridge. You may be able to see part of the path as well. I think I see a really large acorn that you can see up close. The thing that seems to be unifying this drawing the most, and I think the thing that's giving me this mood that I really enjoy, is the trees that are all coming in from the edges and like swooping up towards the middle. Again, you see the multiple perspectives. I think on the side, some things are actually turned on their side with the kind of rocks. I was talking about the right side. And I think it's really, really cool. And then again, the path and the bridge do help you move from one side to the next. Those were on campus. This one is obviously not. This one is clearly a walk around Washington, D.C. It looks like it was around the time of the cherry blossoms blooming, maybe the festival, maybe not. You notice that there are different perspectives on the different parts, and that you are looking much more closely at the cherry blossoms and much further away at the monuments And you can see one full cherry blossom tree. You can see other things that are closer up, twigs of the cherry blossoms. And the repetition of the cherry blossoms also moves you throughout. The road on the bridge also moves you from the left side to the right side, or from the middle to the left, depending on which way you're reading this scroll. The way this building, I don't know if that's the White House, but it's definitely a government building. The way this is coming in off the right at an angle also brings you into the scene, so that's pretty neat. I wanted to include this one especially because it was done vertically, which is very different from the others, but a completely okay way to approach your scroll. A lot of scrolls you would open like up and down, not necessarily unfurl them from right to left or left to right. So this also has some really cool entrance points. This path here, which is done, like it's wider the closer it is to us. It gets skinnier the further it goes away. It leads you to this pond. This is also on campus, by the way, and you're looking down at the pond and you're looking down at the trees around the pond. Then you come up to this clearing, which is kind of gray, and I think it might be a parking lot, and there's trees around it, but this is one of my favorite parts because it feels like it's like an exploded view, like everything is opening up. So each of those trees is looked at from its own perspective. And also, of course, if you wanted to enter from the upper right, you could enter the drawing that way too on this bridge. This one, walk around Bel Air. I think Redner's is in Bel Air. I know exactly where it is. I just don't know the Bel Air boundaries. But it's a different type of scene. It feels more urban. You have this big building. You have these townhouses over here. They're put together in a way that's not exactly, it's kind of like you definitely see the multiple views when you focus back in on the upper right on those townhouses. You have the unification of these two fences. Even though they're different, they kind of add the unity to the scene. And then you have these stairs, which it really makes you want to climb them because they're very much the focal point and right in the middle, but they go to nowhere. If you can't take a walk for whatever reason, you can't go out and about, you can do one of these in a room in your house and treat it the same way as you're kind of exploring a room, an interior space. So what we have here is also has some examples of hierarchical perspective in it, which is when you make the things that are the most important the largest in your drawing. So that's probably a very observational way of doing things because you do pay the most attention and look the most closely at the things that are the most important to you. And so they do kind of feel like they are the largest things. This Rubik's Cube, for example, is disproportionately large and also very, very important. I think this one's interesting. Having talked to the student who drew it, the door on the right is the same door as the door on the left. This is kind of like a walk in a circle around their room, and that's why they're kind of mirror images of each other, is that you're approaching them from different directions, and these are all the important things in the room. And for one final example, don't be afraid to add elements into your drawing that are not just things that you saw on your walk. I do want you to include things on your walk or your drive or your outing for sure, because this is observational, but let your imagination go with this. Please have fun with this. So this one has an Alice in Wonderland vibe for sure. There's two figures that are walking throughout this scene. There's the Alice with the long blonde hair, and then there's a little dude who seems to with a green shirt, who seems to be reappearing in a few places as well. You have all the same things in this drawing that you have in the other drawings, all these multiple perspectives, different ways of looking at things, but you also have this Alice in Wonderland twist. And you have that play that Shazia Sikander had in her work. So this artist may have been influenced by that. I love that you have this path that you can follow through. starting on the left, and Alice walks in, and you can follow Alice's path walking up some stairs, and then all of a sudden you are a very small Alice, and then you see some smaller buildings out that when you come to the top floor, and there's a ladder that you can climb up. You climb up that ladder, and all of a sudden you're on a highway. That you follow that highway turns into a ribbon, and Alice is hanging off the ribbon over the ocean at the end. So I mean, how fun is that? And I'll tell you, so fun. It's really, really fun, I think. So, just want to give you a lot of encouragement that there's no right or wrong with this assignment. What you want to do is, follow the assignment specifications, get a nice scroll cut out of your paper, and then make all those sketches, and then have fun. Let your imagination run wild. Just make sure you include lots of different views and find a way to connect things. And obviously, from the examples, you can use color for this assignment. You don't have to, but this is one where you have complete open media. I think you should take advantage of that and use whatever you like to draw with the most. So if it is pencil, great. If it is charcoal, great. If it's color pencil and you have some, use that. If you like markers, use those. Have fun. Use mixed media. Play with it. Have a lot of fun. So I hope this is also a good release from all the kind of stress that linear perspective can bring. And I think that you'll come up with some really good observations. All right. So I can't wait to see your work.